Um, we're not exactly zeroing in on a particular industry, but I mean, we're talking about taking up a subject matter that affects various industries, which is climate change. So the theme for today's May 2024 Industry Outlook is climate change, resilient strategies for businesses. This webinar is hosted by Nairametrics. It's being recorded, and the recording will be made available on YouTube much later, hopefully by Monday. So a huge thank you to everyone who is here right now, to our panelists who made the time out, and to every guest who is here right now and will still join us. Thank you for choosing to be here. You could have chosen to be anywhere else on a Saturday morning or be doing anything else on a Saturday morning. But you're here and you showed your commitment to economic development and perhaps even financial advancement, your personal financial advancement. It promises to be well worth your time. You can introduce yourself just to keep the chat box, busy and, know who's here with us. You can, share your name, where you're joining us from, and maybe even go as far as sharing the industry you operate in. Perhaps that could even help our panelists provide more context, right, when they're sharing or furthering the conversation. So again, a huge welcome. There will be a section for you to share your questions and answer. There's a Q&A box where you can drop your questions if you have any, and towards the end, our panelists will be available to answer them. So yes, this month's Industry Outlook, climate change, resilient strategies for businesses. We know we're sort of entering a new season. We are not entering, we are in a new season, right? Rainy season here in Nigeria specifically. And every year, weather conditions sometimes appear, right, to be getting more and more extreme. And there's no doubt that these changes can add extra pressures to businesses, perhaps even disrupt supply chains and so on and so forth. So how do businesses adapt? How do they come out resilient out of everything? That's the conversation we hope to have today. So again, welcome. I will be moderating this conversation. I'm Joanna Mustafa, alongside my colleague Samuel Oyekomi. Samuel, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Right.
Thanks for having me, Joanna. Good morning.
Nairametrics has you, but yes, welcome nevertheless. Yeah,
Definitely, Joanna.
so you're going to go ahead and introduce our lineup of panelists for today.
All right. Thank you very much, Joanna. I see we have a list of great set of panelists today with decades of experience across different facets in the Nigerian economy. I would try to read through the profiles of these our panelists today in no particular order and try as much as possible not to, because it's really loaded, I'd say. So first on my list, we have Professor Sunday Abayomi Adebisi. He's a professor of the Department of Business Administrations at the University of Lagos. He's a double professor in the Department of Business Administration at UNILAG, like I said. He is the first occupier professor of Dr. Mike Adenuga Jr., professional chair of entrepreneurial studies, and at the same time, a professor of entrepreneurship, hub, and strategic management in the Department of Business Administration. His research interests include entrepreneurship, hub management, innovation, and startup enablement, youth sustainable employment strategies, sustainable strategic management, and cooperative strategy, as well as international entrepreneurship. He's also the director of entrepreneurship and skills development center, UNILAG Nigeria. He won the hosting right of the African Research Universities Alliance Center of Excellence for Unemployment and Skills Development to make University of Lagos become the leader and hub in Africa for research in youth unemployment and sustainable entrepreneurship in Africa. And I think this list goes on and on, but I'll move from there as we move to Mrs. Pearl Uzokwe. She's the director for Africa Forward Catalyst 2030. She's an accomplished executive with over 2 decades of global leadership and board experience, navigating both the global north and south. As director for African Forward at Catalyst 2030, she's at the forefront of global movement driven by social innovators and entrepreneurs dedicated to realizing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In her role at Catalyst 2030, FEL leads initiatives to support social entrepreneurs and innovators in Africa, fostering a vibrant ecosystem of social innovation and contributing to sustainable job creation on the continent. FEL possesses diverse expertise, having served as a qualified solicitor of the Law Society of England and Wales and a chartered secretary, which forms the foundation of her pivotal roles as director for Sahara Foundation and director of governance and sustainability at Sahara Group. And then we move to our next panelist for the day. That's Mr. Ibrahim Salau. He's the MD CEO of ENV Accord Limited. Ibrahim is an accomplished environmental and social safeguards expert with over 25 years of experience in Africa. He has led numerous environmental and social impact assessments, environmental and social due diligence, and environmental and social management systems of high-profile infrastructure projects in Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, Kenya, and the United Kingdom. He was an ESG consultant with the International Finance Corporation covering the Sub-Saharan Africa region. He was part of the team that drafted the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles prior to its adoption by the financial sector in Nigeria in 2022. He's a member of several professional organizations, including the Council for the Regulation of Engineering Practice in Nigeria, the prestigious International Association of Impact Assessment, and International Society for Sustainable Practitioners. We'll move to the next panelist. It's not the last, but it's the last, but not really the last. That's Suleiman Dikwa, CEO, Green Sahara Nigeria. Suleiman Dikwa is a highly accomplished development and management professional with proven excellence in enterprise leadership, in increasing performance efficiency, and in stimulating bottom line growth for startup, mid-sized, and multinational organizations. He offers a distinctive blend of finance, investment, and accounting leadership with extensive capacities in business development, marketing, and technological development. Member Circular Bioeconomy Alliance and implementer Living Lab Nigeria, founded by HRM King Charles III. His expertise spans multiple industries and sectors across domestic and international markets. He operates within a broad value spectrum, ranging from government projects, development and redevelopment, small business and micro enterprise and entrepreneurship. I think everyone will agree with me that we have a very rich panelist today, which already promises that today's conversation is going to be very insightful. I'll hand over back to you, Joanna.
All right, thank you very much for that, Samuel Oyekomi, and definitely looking forward to hearing the wealth of knowledge and even experience, judging from their profiles that will be shared on this platform today. So welcome once again to Nairametrics May Economic Industry Outlook, right? Climate change, resilient strategies for businesses. We're handing over now to my colleague at Nairametrics, our Head of Strategy and Public Affairs, Wade Aime, as he makes the opening presentation before we dive into the main session.
Thank you, Joanna, and welcome everyone again. Like I said earlier, let me just share my presentation. So we'll be looking at climate change, resilience for strategies for businesses. Like we've been hearing for over a decade now, since about 2013, green is a new gold. And the reason is because we want to make the environment a better place, not just for us today, but for all those who are coming behind us. But to start all this, we would like to look at how the SDGs integrate with the climate resilience. With the climate resilience strategies. First, we need to understand what the SDGs are. The Sustainable Development Goals, it was established in 2015, 17 of them, all interrelated. When you look at the 17 SDGs, from partnerships to elevating poverty and hunger, good health, and having a better understanding of that. And when you look at SDG 1 to 12, where economies are not putting in place the right solutions towards ensuring that SDG 1 to 12 is being attained, then we'll continually have the challenges for 13, 14, 15, 16. And a number of all these things can be done when you use SDG 17 by working together as partners, as collaborators in different areas. The next slide just shows those interconnectivity when you look at the SDGs. 17, partnership, it cuts across every aspect of the SDGs. 8, 9, 10, and 12 speaks about economy. 7, 16, 1, 11, 4, 3, 5, and 2 speaks about the society. A vibrant economy provides a vibrant society. A vibrant society is more adapt to understanding how SDG 16, 14, 13, and 6 all interplay towards ensuring that we have a global environment that is livable not just for today, but also for the future. So we'll just use so when we look at SDG 13 and it talks about climate action, what exactly are the main focuses? It focuses on strengthening resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters in all countries across the globe. The goals also calls for improved education, awareness raising, human and institutional capacity on climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction, and early warnings. And like I said, if you look at SDG 1 to 12, that speaks to a number of economic and societal issues. If we don't address a number of those, then we would have a challenge in addressing SDG 13, which is climate change, which is what everybody is focusing on. The environment is made up not just about the climate, but also the people, and where you ensure that the people live in a decent society, have the economic wherewithal to be able to live above poverty, then you start to see more and more people become more focused on how the climate affects them, because it will affect not only them in person, but also the businesses that they do and how they come together. So we must look at having a holistic approach to sustainability development as it addresses climate change, addressing causes and consequences of climate change. So when you look at, for instance, affordable and clean energy, where you have that, it means less people would burn wood, yet less people would use less of carbon emitting forms of energy towards providing for themselves. Responsible consumption and production also is another thing that we have to look at. When you look at the supply chain management system across the world, how are we consuming? What are we wasting? Are we wasting too much food? Are we wasting electricity? Do we even have enough towards ensuring that we don't have wastages in food? Better education for everyone would make more people better understand the causes and consequences of climate change. We must promote social and economic benefits. What benefits do you get? We know that more and more organizations are looking at environmental friendly solutions, which provides decent work and economic growth, new employment opportunities, new entrepreneurship opportunities, and so on, not just in Africa, but across the world. And we've seen the global space now begin to interact more and more towards ensuring that they fight all the issues relating to climate change. If you look at SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, where we have better planning of communities and cities, what then happens is that things like waste management becomes an opportunity for people to go green, thereby moving not just from waste management, sometimes into energy generation in the form of power, and so on. And at the end of the day, just putting all of it together helps address SDG 13, which is climate action. We use a case study briefly to explain some of the things that can be done or have been done by some organizations. And we look at Unilever as an example. They strategically implemented sustainable sourcing along their supply chains in terms of raw materials, which reduces the environmental impact. Reduction, automatically reducing greenhouse gases. They worked actively with their production supply chain, with their distribution supply chain to ensure that efforts are made to shifting towards renewable energy sources in manufacturing processes and optimizing logistics to lower carbon footprints. We've seen some organizations in Nigeria already doing that, those in power, those in banking, who are beginning to look at or finance, let me say finance in general, who are beginning to look at sustainable and renewable forms of accounting and financing. We've seen that also in telecoms, who are moving gradually from diesel into more renewable forms of energy. And their story aligns with SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. It aligns with SDG 13, which is climate action, and then SDG 15, which is life on land. And that's what I said at the beginning, where we don't integrate all these things into which specific SDGs we integrate into our systems would help better manage SDG 13. Some of the examples are eco-friendly packaging, water stewardship, ensuring that there's water available not just for them for production, but also for communities to drink. Carbon positive strategies being put in place towards ensuring that they become carbon positive in their environment by 2030, where the SDGs, the implementation of the SDGs are expected to end and move on to the next stage. And how has that impacted their business sustainably? Resilience in terms of how they integrate sustainability into their core operations. Reporting. When we're reading Mr. Suleiman's profile, you heard where he's doing accounting and reporting in terms of sustainability, sustainable financing, and all. Even Mr. Salah also. So these are things that we need to integrate into the system towards fighting climate change issues at the end of the day. So how do we enhance business resilience? Diverse stakeholder engagement, sorry, which is what we're doing today at Nairametrics with this industry outlook that is looking at climate. Enhanced resource allocation, how are we allocating resources, not just to climate change, but the things that could affect climate change. SDG 1, SDG 2, SDG 4, in terms of education, in terms of poverty, in terms of hunger. The more people that are out of hunger and out of poverty, the better the better the number of people who will start to think about how their impact or their actions impact the environment. Increase access to innovation. We've seen a lot of that in businesses today, how they're collaborating to enable SMEs tap into cutting-edge research and development opportunities. The academia, Prof is here with us, who are continually teaching new skills, not just to the students, but even larger corporations, to ensure that they can integrate the SDGs and climate action strategies into their system. Sharing risk, which comes from partnerships. More and more organizations are collaborating towards ensuring that not just one person is in charge of whether it's the supply chain or whether it's the supply chain, the supply value chain, whether it's production or distribution, and enhancing that more and more people are integrating sustainable ways towards ensuring that the risk is shared across board, limiting the gaps within the system. Policy advocacy and influence. We've heard a number of climate change activists who are continually speaking about climate change and how that affects not only the weather, but also the environment in which we produce, in which we live, in which we distribute goods and services, and then building long-term relationships. We've seen that in a number of organizations writing their sustainability reports and how they are beginning to work with communities, work with stakeholders towards ensuring long-term sustainable goals are being achieved. So the global standards and frameworks are the things that we'll most likely be talking about, and our panelists will be sharing their insights into some of the things that we need to do. Understanding the task force on climate-related financial disclosures. What are the key elements? Governance, strategy, risk management, the metrics and targets for disclosing consistent climate-related financial risk information. I've continually used the example of supply chain management. What are the benefits to businesses? Enhance investor confidence, manage the risk more effectively, and identify opportunities in transition to low carbon economy. Exploring science-based target initiatives. What are the purposes for that? Encourages companies to set emission reductions targets in how they operate as a business. Businesses align these objectives to greenhouse emission at a pace and scale that science suggests will be necessary to limit global warming. We've seen global warming continually increase every year. This year's dry season was extremely hot, where temperatures were getting, in some places, over 50 degrees centigrade. And the benefits to those businesses that you create new innovation, more people are thinking about ideas, and brings about competitive advantage and helps to align with regulatory compliance issues. Integrating strategies. What are the corporate public policies that organizations are developing to integrate the task force on climate-related financial disclosure, science-based target initiatives, and so on, towards bringing all stakeholders together and engaging them to better understand how they play a role in the value chain of that business. And risk, it helps you also ensure that you can identify risk within that framework, not just within your own organization, but even within from your suppliers, your customers, and how to identify, how to better manage those risks in the long run. Meeting international standards and investor expectations. More and more investors are turning green. Like I said earlier, green is our new gold in terms of compliance to financial disclosure, to scientific-based target initiatives. More and more organizations are beginning to see that there are benefits from that in terms of funding, in terms of investor confidence, and then enhancing transparency in reporting along those framework. We know in Nigeria now that they've started the financial reporting for sustainable businesses. And what are the challenges? The implementation complexity. These are some of the things that our panelists will be speaking about. What kind of challenges are you facing? How do you manage those challenges in terms of training, in terms of creating new talents and specialists that can help mitigate that? Bringing together the accurate and ensuring that data is right and reporting them timely, like we do at Nairametrics. And that's why we're speaking about climate change today. And then what are the continuous updates? What are the things that we need to talk about? And what are the things that we need to walk along that value chain of the SDGs towards ensuring that at the end of the day, our climate action will provide resilience for businesses. If you want to listen to some of our programs that we have on radio, you can follow The Money with Ugodre every Monday on Classic 97.3, 8 a.m. to 8:30, and Everyday Money Matters live on Lagos Talks 91.3, where we talk to individuals and small businesses about managing money and financial literacy. Thank you very much, Joanna. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Yuade, for that very insightful presentation. I will just get right into it because my hands have been itching to pull down some of the nuggets and insights that I'll be getting from this session. And I'll be starting with Mrs. Pearl here. And just in line with some of the things that Yuade has said, all right, the SDG 17, the 17th line item specifically, which speaks to international partnership. So my first question, or I'll call it a twin-one question, right? How has international partnerships enhanced our understanding of climate change in Nigeria specifically, and what are the tangible impacts on global business operations, so involving finance, technology transfer, and trade? Then the other leg of that question would be that what are the short and long-term effects of climate change on business productivity, operational cost, and revenue projections? Mrs. Pearl.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for that. It is a loaded question, honestly, and it's something that, Samuel, thank you so much for that. It could take a while, but I'll break it down into different parts. I will start with saying thank you to Nairametrics for actually bringing this topic to the fore. And I say this because with my experience in this space, and particularly on this continent, unfortunately, not for lack of good reasons, right? Because there's so many different concerns that people are dealing with on a daily basis. What happens is that climate change and its effects, very harmful effects, are put to the back burner. So my very first word is to say thank you to Nairametrics for putting this together and specifically tying it to businesses. Now, coming into it and from the perspective of partnering for the goals, I will start by saying SDG 17, for those who don't know, which is partnering for the goals. Thank you, Wade, for shaping that so nicely, is pretty much my favorite SDG. Why? Because we don't have very much time to achieve this, and there is no better way to do this than to really become very unselfish. Let me use that. It's not a real word, but unselfish about how you go about dealing with this. So the question is saying, how has basically international partnerships significantly enhanced our understanding of this? And so I started off with saying that, yes, in this part of the world, climate change is still seen as quite nascent. What is the one way to ensure that you're enhancing our understanding in this part of the world, that we're leapfrogging it, that for businesses, they're getting tangible benefits in finance? And absolutely 100%, I would say you should be collaborating and collaborating well. And what does that mean for us tangibly? And so I work for an organization called Catalyst 2030. The very premise is that you get social innovators and entrepreneurs who are coming together globally and saying, how do we sit down and work at enhancing this particular ecosystem? So what that means is that those who know better are teaching the other people, and it ensures that you're leapfrogging, you're not making the same mistakes that people have made in other parts of the world, and you gain the benefits from that a lot quicker. And so bringing it back into the Nigerian environment and how that has been beneficial for us here, very first thing is I'm a huge believer in data and the quality of data. And so what this collaboration under SDG 17 has done for us is that you're partnering with international organizations where it comes to climate change. You have your Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You have things like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And for Nigeria, where, like I said, we have a myriad of challenges to deal with, and not without good reason, we have 200 million people to deal with. You're taking the wonderful data that is already provided by these organizations and using that to extrapolate to make decisions that will hopefully be very beneficial for the people. And so you're building on the data, you're building capacity as well. Individuals are learning very quickly from opportunities that these international partnerships will offer. And so that's one way that Nigerian governments, within Catalyst, we have a government champions network, for example. So the governments who are already working on climate can speak to those from, whether it's the global north or for a place, Asia, where they have similarities with ourselves, and say we can very quickly start to learn from them and implement it. Now, if you bring it, I told you the question was loaded, right? So you have the finance side of things. What is the advantage of this collaboration, right? And so you have international finance institutions, and I'm particularly biased to the ones that are also African-led, your AFDBs. They're really working hard to say, your business, whether it's a Sahara or whatever company it is, or a Catalyst, you don't have to do it yourself. We're going to galvanize and bring together the various individual organized countries, other multilaterals and bilaterals who are interested in doing this kind of work, so that we can pool together resources that we can share. So we have things like the Green Climate Fund that they're working on, focused on funding, for example, Nigerian businesses who are particular about investing in renewable energy. You have the African Union supporting this, building frameworks around it. So again, you're saying, don't do it yourself. How do we leapfrog this? Imagine you have frameworks that have been setting around climate change. The AU has 10-year strategies around this. Each country is then able to basically implement once the AU already has a framework that can essentially be rolled out in the various African countries, as opposed to the countries doing it one after the other. Then if you come to an area like risk management as well, international partnerships are just basically helping, creating financial instruments that basically help with managing climate risk. We're talking about the rainy season here in Nigeria. This is something that is very, very dear to all of our hearts, because anybody who was here over the last few, I think decade to decade, you can see the incredible difference, basically. So for even those who think climate change is an Oyinbo thing, it doesn't really concern us. Just take the issue of flooding. You can start to see how that is really impacting us. I say learn from those who've done this and who've basically struggled with areas like this. Kenya, just earlier in this month, declared an entire day of mourning because they lost 238 people to flooding. Nigeria, bringing it back home last year, based on figures that I got from NEMA, They said 33,000 people were affected by floods in our own country. Over 7,000 people were displaced. This is not a nice to have topic. This is something that should be raising alarm bells in organizations to say, how do we build in that resilience? How do we work together to basically ensure that we're not left on the back burner, we're not being reactive? And another area that Partnering for the Goals has basically helped is around technology transfer. We can't do everything ourselves. We know that these, unfortunately, in the area of climate change can be very expensive. The capital expenditure upfront is high. And so collaborating with countries who also country that will give them social impact at numbers and at levels that they wouldn't get in their own more developed climes, you can basically leverage on the technology that they have, bring it in here to help us with reducing our own carbon footprint. And then finally, on the trade side of things, when you're talking about, I know Wade's touched on this, sustainable supply chains, I think it goes without saying again that when you start to, international trade agreements are basically increasingly insisting on higher environmental standards. I know for organizations, what we had to comply with, whether it's with renewing credit lines with international banks, has basically risen. And it's a case of, fix up or lose out. And so it's imperative now, as you're seeing it also seep into the regulatory environment, that you really up the ante in terms of your understanding of what these global standards are. You start retrofitting your organizations, look at your supply chains to ensure that it's more eco-friendly, look at how you can minimize these very extensive and cross-continental supply chains, and so that you're minimizing your organization's carbon footprint. I'm really very conscious of time as well, because I know this is one part of the question. Just looking at examples that we have in this part of the world where partnering has worked. Everyone has probably heard about the renewable energy projects that Nigeria has done with international organizations on Nigeria's electrification project with the World Bank. What's it working on? Sustainable power for undeserved communities. Okay. And so I will stop here for now and just see if you want me to do the second question or if I should pause.
Thank you very much, Ampero. But I think you can still go ahead with the second question, because again, the understanding is that we want to have knowledge about how climate change and how it will impact in businesses. So of course, we can give response to the short and long-term effects of climate change on business productivity, operational cost and revenue projections.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for that clarification. So I think starting off with the framing where I've said, it's when you know better, you do better. And coming to this part of the world is saying, okay, we know that this is happening. We can see it around us. We can see the deforestation. We can see the flooding. We can see this, the migration, all of these effects, the erosion here in our own country. It's not far away. It's not in a textbook. So it's like, how do you then ensure that you are looking out for the short-term impacts, the long-term impacts, and protecting yourself as a business? So some of those short-term impacts and effects, for sure, you have impact on productivity for organizations, right? And so when you say you have disruptions in your supply chain, extreme weather events, we've mentioned this already, things like the floods and the droughts, they're certainly affecting our supply chain. They're affecting the arrival of raw materials. It's affecting food security. So businesses that are relying on these raw materials need to very quickly start to think about their plan Bs, how they can holistically support these organizations that they're getting these raw materials from, because you already can see them from extrapolation that this is coming. You don't want to be waiting and be reactive around it. Another thing that it does when it comes to productivity is just looking at I would say the wellness, the well-being of your workforce. I am sure that for those of us who are let me start with Lagos, and I know that's in different parts of Nigeria as well, the level of heat that has been recorded in recent times has been phenomenal. I know the other day I was looking at my dashboard and I saw 44 degrees centigrade, which I hadn't seen, and it was just 10 a.m. in the morning. It definitely is hampering productivity. Then you take that to businesses where you have employees who are working outside in the sun. If you take it to those who are in the real estate business, for example, manual laborers, labor-intensive industries, it will certainly start to impact those businesses and their productivity if you're not thinking about how to protect them and how to alleviate some of these the impact. Then, of course, there's the operational cost, really, of of climate change. And if you look at what that is meaning, it's your nickel and dimes, right? So I was talking about the extreme heat. What then comes with that? Unfortunately, if you look at Nigeria, not only do we have the extreme heat at the moment, but we're also dealing with increased cost of power, right? And so you combine the increased cost of power with the increased heat, and you're finding that a lot of businesses are struggling with that. And then it becomes a case of sitting down and thinking, if my workforce, who I'm with, my most important, resource in this space, right, are not going to be as productive as they need to be. I need to be thinking long term about their comfort levels and improving their productivity. And so this might be the time to say, look, we're going to take on short-term high capital expenditure for long-term benefits. And it's been interesting to see the transition, or faster transition, to sustainable sources of energy, to solar-powered sources of energy, with a lot of businesses saying, look, this is not going to be sustainable. The costs are not sustainable. The disruption to our business and their productivity is not sustainable. So we might as well take that hit now for long-term benefits. We already know that the impact of some of these, the climate change, if you have your extreme flooding, like we saw, the images were frightening for Kenya. Immediately you have impacts of physical structures, right? And so these are things that businesses can start to think about. Ensure that you have insurance in place to minimize the impact of that and alleviate any hits on your revenue projections. And revenue projection, of course, is one of the short-term impact areas. Long-term impact, again, productivity is one of those things. You start to see operational cost. If you see that this is certainly not going anywhere, like we see with the changes, the significant changes in weather, you definitely will have to start thinking about how you invest in resilience, more to speak, especially for businesses that rely on, for example, raw materials coming from places where there really isn't any security around that. You need to be thinking about how to invest in climate resilient infrastructure, invest in technologies. And like I said, unfortunately, in this area, there's no doubt about it, these investments can be substantial at the onset, but it's something that will pay off in the long run. And it's been very good to see these transitions start to happen. Operationally as well, one of the things that businesses will look out for is the increased regulatory compliance. I know Wade's touched on it for Nigeria as well. It's important to not just prepare for it in terms of the financial, but to get in place the employees as well with sufficient understanding of these global standards, start training individuals within the organization, start the data collation process, putting in the processes that would ensure that you're continuously collating this data and able to do better year on year. It will affect your revenue projections for sure. There are going to be shifts as well. I say the Gen Z generation keep teaching us as well. This generation is basically telling us what they want with their money, definitely. And so the businesses that are adaptable, we say they're ambidextrous, who read the writing on the wall, see what the way the world is going, observing global trends, will start to adjust. I'm seeing businesses, Stanbic IBTC has built its head office. Its green credentials are the highest that we've seen, one of the highest that we've certainly seen in this part of the world. And they're just ensuring that it has multiple effects on the morale of the employees, the organization's level of responsibility, of course, and it certainly impacts its ability to access finance as well, because that responsibility is now tied to very tangible goals, and you can see the positive effects on the environment as they make these changes. And so I will stop here for now in terms of short and long-term effects.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mrs. Spell. And I took some interesting notes there. I start with the fact that, of course, we must collaborate when it comes to the issues of climate change. You talked about the issue of flood. We've seen that in the last few years in Nigeria, seen that in the case of Kenya, and also if you go to South Brazil, also I think about over 600,000 people have also been displaced as a result of the flooding. Some of the issues of food inflation that we're having in Nigeria has been partially also attributed to the flood that we had about 2 years ago. So thank you very much, Mrs. Spell, for that. I'll be coming to you, Professor Sunday at DBC. With your experience, your research interest around entrepreneurship, hub management, innovation, and startup enablement, I would like to ask, all right, how are companies integrating climate change mitigation into their operations and corporate social responsibility initiatives? I know Spell has mentioned some of the areas by which these issues around climate change is affecting businesses and their operations. So how are they, in this case, integrating this mitigating strategies into their operations and CSR initiatives, Professor?
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Nairametrics, for this, hub for Nigerians to be quite aware of what we need to do and how we need to respond, to this, climate change. So, because I'll be talking about maybe what the companies are doing or what they're supposed to do, because it looks as if we're yet to see much traction. There are a couple of them, they're doing, bit of thing, major in recycling. However, but then because I will talk to them in that, I want to show us a video for 2 minutes, so that at least many of the companies that are online and even all of us can take a clue. Because I was extremely shocked and I blessed with what when I saw that video, asking myself, even myself as a professor, how much am I doing in this? So let me quickly share my screen. I believe that has been enabled.
I got a message, I'm hoping that you will listen. And so I made a mission to let you know my position. When our planet is overheating, I'm here to tell you why and what we can do to heal it. Around the earth we have the atmosphere, sort of a layer of protection, that's why life grows here. It protects us from radiation so we have no fear, and we can all live easy like I don't care. In the atmosphere we have the greenhouse gases that trap the heat of the sun and keeps on passing it back to us after the sun goes to bed. That way we don't freeze up at night and wake up dead. The problem now is that the gases keep increasing, trapping more heat than we need, and so the planet's overheating. Most of the gases are the ones we be creating when we burning fuel, CO2, we make it daily. To make it stop, we just have to slow down in producing the problem and figure out how to absorb it. It turns out nature's solution was trees, but guess what? We cut them all down to build our city. I will do my best. I will not neglect. My duty is to planet Earth. I will make sure I play my role in saving the planet, and I will respect the future of life on Earth. And together we will protect every man, every woman, child, plant, and animal. Now that we know the problem, it's time to figure out how to solve them. First is how do we cut back on producing the gases. Next is how do we absorb them. To cut back we have to use cleaner sources of energy when we can. It's time to go green. To absorb it, the smart thing is to team up with nature. Cut 1 tree, plant 2 or 3. Do you know that the changes in the climate are affecting our planet? It's time to do something about it. Do you know if we don't start trying and we just keep denying it, the planet will be dying? Listen up, it's time to take a stand. It's time to understand, it's time to make a man. It's time to be the man, woman, children of change. Let's take on this responsibility together and say I will do my best. I will not neglect. My duty is to planet Earth. I will make sure I play my role in saving the planet, and I will respect the future of life on Earth. And together we will protect every man, every woman, child, plant, and animal. I will do I will do my best. I will do my best. And together we will protect every man, every woman, child, plant, and animal.
So, well, thank you, everyone. I do not know if we actually are connected with this video from Bakala Malaka. Sorry.
Go on, Prof.
Okay, so, all right. 1 minute so that I don't want any distraction from here. Some of the videos I see on, so we have to. All right. Thank you. So, like I was saying, by now, I will start it by saying by now, I'm expecting every responsible companies in this nation to roll, red carpet for Makala, because, see the extent to which he has been able to use a skill to pitch to us the importance of climate change, and now we all need to do our best. I know a couple of companies have been trying to do a couple of things in the nation to say, because after COP28, it looks as if it's now becoming more important and real to companies for them, to take action. And it's quite important that the action to be taken is not for many of the companies to begin to say, okay, let's take back some of my whatever I'm using, my packaging, my PET bottles, the plastic they used to buy my products. How can I recover them back? I think that the first thing to do is even for them to begin to think of changing most of their input to biodegradable, inputs. That is very important. How, can they begin to think of the fact that from all my input, how many of these input, if I'm very conscious of it, that, I can launch to be biodegradable, input. Because at the end of the day, you and I know that even in Lagos State, where, thousands of tons of waste are generated, which at the end of the day are sources to a lot of this, climate change, negativity. How many of those waste, do we recycle? Less than 15%. So then, before generating it, if we take an action, the companies now taking an action that if it is possible for me to deploy, the input that will not, have some negative impact on the society, then I'm doing it responsibly. And for me, that is very important. Every company, there is this conflict. When you talk about sustainability, factors, the economic, the social, and the environment. A company is here to live, and profitability is the bloodstream of the company. That is for sure. And as a professor of entrepreneurship and business, I know for sure that the sustainability of any business is for it to be able to have excess of revenue over cost. But one of the things that is very important too is that because companies are open system, that they take input from the society and take their output back to the society. So in two ways, the companies take from the society, and it is the society that will equally consume whatever they've added value to. And when some of them are taken from the society, this is done with a lot of a level of irresponsibility. And when they're bringing the output back to the society too, are done with a level of responsibility where you're packaging and everything that is taking your product, to the environment when the product is consumed, and nobody is taking decision about to do with what has conveyed, the packaging and every other thing has conveyed, your product to the environment. So it therefore, become very important on this, company, that in taking all this decision of profitability, it is important then to care for the society, because the society itself must live before the company can live. Profitability of company is resident in longevity, and society is the owner and the custodian of longevity. Because if the society is not there, Unilever will not be here. If the society is not there, PZ will not be here. So you can imagine when the society has not grown to the point of having purchasing power to buy whatever Unilever and PZ are producing, they were not in Nigeria. It was when the society has grown enough that they had to make overture to this nation, and today for them to pursue their economic, economic interests. So that needs to be properly understood. When we discuss this issue, we balance it. Nobody saying that the company, should stop making profit because it is their activities, of adding values to inputs that they make profit from. But what is being said is that pari passu, it is important that while trying to do this, you pay attention to how what impact your operations will have on the society, which is, the crux of the matter we're discussing here today. And not only the society, even the environment, where many of them, take their input from, maybe from the soil, their input, most of the input, come from the soil, whether, metal issue, whether it has to do with, agricultural input, whatever you talk, it comes from the head. There is none of them that is coming from heaven. And you
All right, I think there's a network glitch there. Try to see if Professor Sunday will be able to come back in. Meanwhile, while we wait for his network to be restored, I would like to go to the next question. And the next question is coming to you, Suleiman Dikwa. If you can hear me, please, can you just indicate?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Right. As a development and management professional, I know we've spoken quite a number of things around the impact of climate change on businesses, operations, revenue, and cost. And I think one of the things that would be interesting to many industry players is to even have an understanding on which of the industries are most vulnerable to this risk of climate change. And then we would also want to have an understanding of what factors actually particularly make them vulnerable to this climate change risk. Mr. Suleiman.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samuel. And I would like to refer you back to the presentation that it's all together. When I was reflecting upon the question that which industry is most impacted and why, then I realized they're all interconnected, as has been somehow, even the previous speakers before me have said something to that effect. So it's important to understand the fundamentals. We can talk of agriculture, but when you talk agriculture, insurance applies to agriculture. It relates to finance, it relates to infrastructure, construction, water, sanitation, transportation, manufacturing, and supply chains. So they are kind of together. So it's very important that the foundation is laid by understanding what is even the basis of the conversation. It's about manufactured capital and natural capital, their measurement and impact. And since all these industries tend to, in the first place, use manufactured capital to access natural capital too, before they can engage in whatever industry they are, so they are interconnected. But when we look at agriculture, for instance, it's evident in my last 20 years of being in this sustainability business, I've seen gradually how the rain patterns have changed. I've seen gradually how even in cities like Jos now, we had about 40 degrees Celsius last year. So we go to healthcare as well. When you look at healthcare and you relate it to the climate change, it's not also only about trees being cut down, but most of our medicine, take the horseshoe, for instance, whose extract, which is about to go extinct, which extract is a major input in pharmaceutical industries. So the moment our ecosystem is being destroyed, it's taking us further away to finding cures to terminal diseases like cancer. Maybe the cancer cure is somewhere there in the bush, in the forest, which we intend to find. There has been a major shift, which is in the 1950s. Up to the 1950s, resources have been the major geological forces. When humanity looks for resources, they move to where they find resources, they settle down, they organize themselves. But the Holocene era ended in the 1950s. And from then, experts agree that we have moved to the Anthropocene era, whereby human being is now the geological force. And it's evident in Nigeria, whereby driven by poverty, a lot of supply chains have been disrupted because it not only affects climate change, does not only affect the natural resources, but also it affects when we can relate it to insecurity and look at disruptions in logistics. So I cannot zero down on a particular factor because at the bottom line of it is natural capital, which is finite, which brings us to the concept of weak and strong sustainability. There is this tendency from the time of YouTube Pro culture now, that's why there's not a lot of action on ground beyond just bringing in policies, bringing in regulations, try to enforce them, trying to have an agreement. There has been a case of weak sustainability whereby you find out that manufactured capital, which is transactional, which has no value until the transaction occurs, is being used to pursue the sustainability of managing natural capital, which is finite, which has a value irrespective of whether it is sold or not. Shares can vanish, money can vanish, derivatives can vanish. So at the fundamental of it is that the very core, at the core of the existence of humanity is the natural capital, which is being used as a rate, as agreed by experts, that if we continue at the rate of consumption that we do go on, we will need 1.6% of the resources of the earth in the next 50 years. In the next 50 years, and if we continue, it goes to so because these resources are finite, and then we need to add value. When you look at how companies are reporting, what factors affect them, it is a big risk. The big risk there is that how are they attaining value to their resources? Our accounting information system and everything goes towards the valuation of manufactured capital. So if we continue with that thinking, already this is a major factor that affects all businesses, which are in the first place integrated. So we need to actually report natural capital. What is its value? What is its effect? What is there? What is the outcome? If you look at the SDGs, there will be a lot of conversation around ESGs. And in my own opinion, it's just a physication. This conversation has been going on for the last 60 years. So why don't we start with the SDGs, which is a factor? Why not inputs and outcomes on a simple SDG metrics, which will enable to show clear outputs in that. When you look at energy and utilities as well, it has been threatened not only by the availability of the but also the type of energy as well. Somehow, Africa and Nigeria is lucky because what has been our underdevelopment, it is now an opportunity. So the conversation has been about mitigation, but mitigation is no longer the issue, it's about adaptation. I'm somehow jumping into the next question because everything is interrelated and you have to connect the dots. So if you assess this and you now have to think, where do companies have to start? You have to have a measurement criteria. I've had people talking about gathering data, which is essential, gathering information, analyzing information, and what tools are there at the high level, because education is key in terms of doing that. Where you see movement across the world, towards first educating, understanding what is the impact. Who are those vulnerable? What are the opportunities to that? But you see that at this point, what we're thinking, and that's why the concept of weak sustainability is that, for instance, how do we actually aggregate? How do we transit from one energy to the other? How do you now see a prevalence of thinking going in line with what the professor said earlier, in terms of using manufactured capital to solve an issue that will continue to aggravate. So if a company continues to stockpile stock or stock money or just in time, you are now just attacking the symptoms. That is where we have to avoid on this journey, to avoid that transition whereby we go headlong into green washing, which is going to happen because a lot of reports by companies. So companies we need to know their impact. For instance, using the IPAT metrics. What is the impact? What is the population? What is the affluence? And what is the technology? Because the impact, the population and affluence is very important. That's why you see the bigger the company, the bigger the bigger the country, 10% of the countries in the world are actually responsible for the carbon footprint of the world. So a company has to look at both the life flow analysis, the material flow analysis, the ecological footprint. These are clear, simple measurements so that we don't lose this with buzzwords, fancy configuration. The outputs are clear, and we should go from inputs, outcomes, to clear outputs, which actually measure well-being. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Suleiman, for that.
Sorry, I was logged off for some time, so apologies, and I'm back.
Yeah, welcome, Prof. Please go ahead. If you can, please just wrap up in the short time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, and thank you very much, Mr. Suleiman. So that was very, great. I was just about to talking about the fact that the companies need to be extremely responsible and avoid, this, greenwashing. A situation where, misleading information are being given today because it has become compulsory for me to report, my footprint in the climate change. What am I doing? And you see many people today, just trying to say, I'm doing this one, many of the things they're doing, you cannot even measure them. So that's why I like what Mr. Suleiman had said. It's important to the company to, some of them, they green shift. Green shifting is you blaming the customers. Oh, yes, if I give them this back, if I do this, why can't they, dispose responsibly? That is because you yourself too, you can take a step backward and take a decision, to ensure that you look at your material processes, your material input, and take a conscious effort, to go the way of biodegradable, material. Now, one of the challenges again that is happening with some of the companies now is what we talk, green crowding. They just put themselves in the midst of some people that are doing, people from probably the developed world that are doing some measure of things that are probably well structured in climate change action, and just get themselves stuck there. You see them in all meetings, and you cannot measure what impact they are creating in the nation. So all of this need to be avoided by most of the companies. And once that has actually happened, then we'll be expecting most of the companies, number one, to strengthen their resilience and adaptive capacity. It's important so that just like my colleague said, yeah, we've been talking about mitigation, but we do know that all we need to do now is to follow through with the adaptive strategies, because whether we like it or not, we have more than 6 billion people in the world. We all have carbon footprint, and we will continue to do. And again, unfortunately, we now have companies, that are even doing, what, especially from the developed world. But what is important is that for each of all these companies, they must pay attention into strengthening their resilience and adaptive, capacity, so that at the end of the day, they will be able to know what actions they need to deploy when it has to do, with climate change. They must equally invest into building knowledge of unit, department, or independent people who will always, draw them back to say, hey, our CEO in the management meeting, I think, we're not tracking our carbon footprint, well. I think that these are the actions we're supposed to do. And if people don't have the capacity, many people in the organization, many CEO do not even understand how they're impacting the climate change. They don't know, like Major said, some believe that what are we talking about here? What are they? I'm making profit, I'm paying salaries of people. And you're talking about, about climate change. So this capacity building is very, very important. And we should not forget to, there is the, the $100 billion, Green Climate Fund. It's available too for everyone, for countries, for association of people that can come together, this company, to ensure that they draw from this kind of fund, to support all the things they are doing. The carbon credit is there and everything. So to round up is to just say that they take deliberate action by, we're seated here today talking about it. Companies must even have seminars in their organization that talks about it and so, okay, our workers, you are here to tell us, how do you think that we are impacting the climate change of our environment by our activities? Hey, Sumonu, tell us too. Ayo, what do you think? And when these are done, they can sit down, okay, what should be our own, strategy, to address this? And if this young girl that I played the video could do this, I'm thinking that, the company can do more. So thank you very much, Amit, for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Sunday, for that. And I think what you very much alluded, which is in line with what our other previous speakers have said, is that we all need to act, we all need to take deliberate action, and businesses and companies also need to be deliberate about understanding the impact of their operations on the environment. I'll be coming to you now, Mr. Ibrahim, based on your vast experience across businesses and environments and whatnot. I know one of the things that can be of interest to many businesses around the world is the public perception about what they do. And so, and that leads me to this question. How does climate change impact companies' reputation? And again, how does public perception drive corporate sustainability efforts for these businesses? Mr. Ibrahim.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Mr. Ibrahim.
Oh, great. Let me join others to thank Nairametrics for providing this platform for this competition. There cannot be better time than now. So, to your question, how does climate change impact a company's reputation, and how does public perception drive corporate sustainability efforts? That's the question, right? Someone.
That's the question, yes, sir.
Okay, great. So, a number of previous speakers, but in terms of the impact of climate change on a company's reputation, the very first driver is customer expectations, trust. If you take, environmental responsibility, for example, is one that is a great expectation of consumers today. Consumers increasingly expect companies to responsibly towards the environment. Companies perceived to not be doing so tend to lose trust and loyalty. So that's one key driver, customer expectation. Around this is also transparency and accountability. These days, we have a number of reporting frameworks out there that allows businesses what they're doing as far as climate change is concerned. So a company that fails to seize this opportunity to demonstrate transparency and accountability clearly, because of the demanding nature of consumers today, would face the risk of losing its reputation. The other key driver is investor concerns. So today you have a lot of more discerning investors. So for businesses, reputation will mean a lot to your investors. Again, paying attention to climate change issues will affect your reputation, which in turn will mean a lot to potential investors. So this question speaks to one of the issues around climate change, which is that it is not only about the risks that are involved, it is also about the opportunities that goes with managing those issues. So you the risk of losing reputation, but provides an opportunity for attracting investors where you are able to build your business's reputation around very strong climate performance. The other point that can affect reputation as far as businesses are concerned is regulatory compliance and legal risks. So you are, as a company, you're expected to adhere to environmental regulations and also, enclosures and fines. We know that, which is not good for the company's reputation. So we know that key to the challenge of climate change is the burning of fossil fuels. And there are some limits in terms of how much of the fossil fuels you can emit. So there are certain limits to be met where violate can affect your reputation. Above all, as far as reputation is concerned, is that you have a fantastic opportunity to enhance your competitiveness via brand differentiation and then via the leveraging of innovation and efficiency. So company leading in sustainability can differentiate their brand, attracting environmentally conscious consumers and employees. And then around innovation and efficiency, this can be leveraged to have benefits that speaks directly to the bottom line in many ways. For example, through new products and services. For example, through the elimination of fossil fuel for more green or alternative fuels. So that's as far as reputation is concerned. Speaking to the part of the question relating to public perception and corporate sustainability efforts. I mean, this is the era of big social media influence. The rapid dissemination of information via social media amplifies the public's ability to influence corporate behavior. So negative news can spread, which can prompt companies to act more sustainably, avoid. Then there is the issue around employee expectations. As said, we have more discerning investors earlier. We also have more discerning employees. The Gen Zs care a lot about mental issues, politics. So you see that organizations that pay attention to these issues can really enhance competitiveness in the way that they attract talents. It can be what makes an employee to go for a star employee, for that matter, or star potential employee, to decide to join competition instead of company B. So finally, it's the point around advocacy and activism. That's something that we really need to see a lot more of in this climate. And that's one of the key differences between, say, the global north and the global south. You see that, especially in developing countries, sub-Saharan Africa. So you see that level of advocacy, the level of activism is higher in those other climes, especially in the up north. So the issue is where people feel that they will be held accountable, and not say NGOs or activists, they are more likely to do the right thing. So pressure by NGOs and activists can really go a long way in influencing the right action by businesses. Finally, is the role of media and public relations. For example, what Nairametrics is doing today is really good. Media coverage, like what we're having today, because when we talk about climate change, the key point is you need to know what it means to your organization. It's really broad, and there are different options. So if you don't know what it means, then if you don't know what climate change is, then you may not know the right action to take in the response. So creating awareness is really key. And I want to use this opportunity again to thank Nairametrics for putting this together, helping to create that awareness that will go a long way in encouraging positive action. Let me stop there and
thank you very much as well for being a part of this conversation and gracing the platform. Definitely there's the need for individuals and companies to renew their commitments to climate change action, right? And we can't underestimate, as a lot of the previous speakers have shared, the impact that climate change is having on, businesses. Again, we'd like to thank you all for being here. Our time is fast spent, but we're diving into the second session right now. I see Maxwell in the chat room. Yes, this conversation will be made available possibly on Monday on YouTube. It's being recorded right now, so you can always rewind, re-listen in case you missed anything. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. We're moving on to the second session, and I'm sticking with you, Ibrahim, right? And obviously, you're an industry leader. You're the MD, the CEO of Enva Accord. Hope I got that right. Yes, Enva Accord Limited, right? And we've had earlier Mrs. Fumi share the need for partnership, to achieve common goals when it comes to climate change conversation, SDG 17. So how can, as an industry leader, from your perspective, how do you think businesses can collaborate with the government and NGOs and other stakeholders, right, to develop effective climate adaptation strategies?
Thank you so much. It speaks to SDG 17, as has been previously discussed, and this is important. One of the key areas for this collaboration and partnerships around data. If you look at Nigeria today, our inflation is running away now in excess of 30%. And we all know that food inflation is the victim of what is driving this inflation. Now, talking about food inflation, at the heart of that is food security, which speaks directly to the agri sector. As far as climate change is concerned, the agri sector is one of the sectors that is most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And to be able to respond to this challenge, we need information, we need data. For example, around the changing precipitation patterns. Getting this data, there are many ways. Each company can decide to get its own data, but how effective can that be where we have the entire agri sector coming together and working with, say, the University of Lagos, establishing a chair, can be center of research for monitoring the changing precipitation data nationwide, and then having each organization in that agri sector paying a token and accessing the information that it needs. that will be a brilliant example of how we can collaborate and partner to respond to the challenge of climate change. So the opportunities are huge. By extension, one of the issues, one of the additional approaches change is risk hedging, insurance, climate insurance specifically. This relies a lot on data. So what the few of the insurance companies that are offering this service today rely on expensive foreign gathered data, whereas the most effective solutions as far as climate change adaptation is concerned are really those that are homegrown. So, and that's one of the reasons why the premium for insurance climate, for climate insurance today, it's really very high, making it largely affordable, for example, by smallholder farmers. So, but if we collaborate and gather the kind of sector collaboration, working with other sectors like the academia, you can have homegrown data that can serve so many different actors in this area. So that's just one very good example of the kind of impact that collaboration and partnerships can have. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that, Mr. Abraham. Hopefully we see more of these collaborations between NGO, businesses, and the governments going forward. Climate change is an important discussion to be had, and we're happy to have you be a part of that discussion. We have Faye Oseni in the chat room introducing herself, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat room, share where you're joining us from, and perhaps the industry you play in. And if you have questions, feel free to drop them as well. I'm staying with you, Mr. Abraham, and this time around we're coming to climate insurance. What role would you say climate insurance perhaps plays in safeguarding businesses against losses due to climate impact? And is it a conversation? Is it something that's being embraced? What are the latest trends in this sector when it comes to climate insurance?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so talking about climate insurance now, of course, we're all familiar with the traditional insurance schemes, but the thing about climate insurance is, just like the traditional insurance schemes, it's a way of transferring the risk. The farmer wants to be sure that irrespective of the rainfall patterns, I want to make this amount of money. And the insurer says, okay, we can guarantee that this particular amount of rainfall will happen. But if you think that you can have more than that, and you are willing to pay a premium, then we can support you and help you edge that risk. So the key point around that, it's transferring the risk, because the central issue around adaptation is that some climate change impacts are already happening. One of them is the precipitation that I have. We see very clearly that our rainfall patterns have been changing. So there are some impacts of climate change happen that are. This is what the insurance sector tends to support. In terms of what's happening in Nigeria. So the example of risk climate insurance that I talked about is called parametric insurance. That is, you are looking at certain parameters yes, we are working with players to say, if this parameter is not going to exceed this, then we can work with you to hedge any risk. So as far as trends that we are seeing in Nigeria is concerned, the climate insurance sector is evolving in response to this, for this type of service and need for better risk management. So let me just provide a few examples. So there's a growing focus on agri insurance, again, because of already happening impacts of climate change that we're seeing. And then we're seeing some government and regulatory support. So the government has been active in promoting climate resilience through policies and frameworks, many of them. So the establishment, for example, of the National Agricultural Insurance Corporation aims to support farmers and agri businesses, ensuring that they have access to insurance products that are tailored towards this need. In addition, the Climate Change Act of 2021 provides a framework for integrating climate change action to national development priorities. Then there is the issue of sustainability and ESG integration. The insurance industry in Nigeria is increasingly incorporating ESG principles into their operations, again, driven by the investor to a very large extent. That's what we are seeing. And then increasing business case for this type of services. But the far more, hello?
Yeah, sorry, in 30 seconds, please, if you can land.
Yes, the far more
of time.
The leverage of technology is leverage of technology and data gathering using IT tools like big data, all of that, which enhances weather modeling and related data management issues. Is another factor that is helping the insurance sector to provide these services. But there are challenges which I talked about earlier, so I'll just leave you that.
Thank you very much. So there are provisions for businesses when it comes to safeguarding against losses due to climate impacts that you have highlighted. But I'm coming to Prof now, Professor Sunday Adebisi. I'm a business owner listening now, and I'm sure that there are those who are listening, right? Are there certain tools or framework that they can adopt, right, to somewhat manage their exposure to climate-related risk? And when we say tools, we're talking also, future-forward tools like AI and, blockchain and so on and so forth. Are there those technologies and tools that businesses can adopt to help manage, their exposure to climate-related risk and, build their resilience against climate change? Prof.
Thank you very much. In actual fact, data, keep on talking about it. Because if any very strong, valid, respected actions are to be taken, they're supposed to be based on data, and which is, there's a debt of that data around us. And some of this technology, I would say, opportunities that are available today can support us heavily. When you look at, artificial intelligence, even when we look at the most, vulnerable aspect of the sector, which is agri-sector, today we discovered that AI has been supporting in weather prediction, predictive, weather forecast at every point in time that can show to us that probably is the next 3, 4, 5 months, even there are some that will be for 6 months, that can help the farmer to plan ahead of time, and that can equally help the insurance company, just like Mr. Ibrahim is saying, that can help the insurance company to see where they can support. Because if you do not deploy this, it is difficult today for climate insurance to thrive in Nigeria because it is like you go into a black market. It is not defined. I give you an example. It was just like the other time when, Naira was on a free fall. You stay before someone that want to sell, dollars for you, and in just 1 minute, you tell it's no longer 1,400, it's now 1,600. When you are still arguing, it tell no, it has even changed now to 1,700. That is what is happening in this sector, and it's difficult even for the insurance company for them to understand how to price this and support all those, the people that want to buy this insurance policy. But artificial intelligence and big data, blockchain are available, to support in this manner. So companies, they have to latch on to this in the areas of their climate change action and climate change, activities. That is to say, they must be able to integrate artificial intelligence to their operations as it regards tracking their carbon footprint, which they can present as a valid evidence, as a valid evidence even for carbon credit, which is equally available, at time, to explore. Again, for most of the for the insurance company too that really want to play this way, because it's a great opportunity. It's an opportunity that has not been tapped. Because when you look at the agricultural sector, look at what just happened in Kenya that we have talked about today. And I was in Kenya, I just came from Nairobi last week. A professor friend, the University of Nairobi, everything he has been investing into in his lifetime is using its money to invest into his farm. He prides himself as a farmer who is not even, in agriculture because he's equally a professor of business, and said, this is their planting season. And some people are just taking loan to plant. And now rain has washed off all the things, their tea, their coffee, and everything. So the question is this, who pays for it? Was there? Yes, he did mention that there was some prediction that people just thought that we had this last in 1995. Where is this coming from? So many people did not believe, even when they were told to relocate. They never believed. So you see, and it's because nothing is actually given a data that can be trusted. Nothing is actually, showing to every one of us to say, hey, this will happen in the next, in the next 72 hours. I have monitored, one time that some of this heavy tsunami was about to happen in the US. And I was monitoring it. They were saying in the next 43 hours, it will get to this. It will get to Ohio. So in the next 17 hours, it's approaching. This is the speed. I was seeing it live. And they had to move in, forcing people out of the house, even people that refuse to, that still say, I'm not leaving. So do we have that kind of process in Africa? And the tools that can do it, they're available. So the companies themselves, especially, to support what Mr. Salah said, the insurance company, they want to play in this green area. They need to deploy this tool to help them to do pricing, because they will understand if in 6 months, there's a tool that can accurately predict what will happen in Ogun area where people are doing cassava farming. So they can't say that, hey, well, this is going to happen. We will set this policy for you so that, we will be able to mitigate and able to pay compensation if invariably it happens. And if the people can believe in it, at the end of the day, you will see that, the cushioning effect, we have handshake with the people that we have to buy the policy. So all of these things are available. We have to adopt it. It's already staring at us at the face whether we like it or not. So it's there. If we refuse to adopt, the world will not wait for us. Much of this calamity will continue to happen. So at the companies, we have to do that independently and equally. And I love what Mr. Salah said in rounding up. You see, we need to integrate research into all of these things. I'm looking to when, a company in a level will say, okay, today I sit on a professorial chair that was institutionalized by Mike Adenu. And the first in entrepreneurship. And I've made that in almost the entire nation in terms of entrepreneurship, which has been infused into the entire national curriculum and all of those things. I'm looking for when somebody who's on climate change. This is a professorial chair. I want you to support both, you know, the company, the society, and can we integrate and provide data for us? Pull people together so that, you know, you work with the industry and let us be able to support, you know, this way. And I think at that point in time, we'll be able to make, you know, a better progress with all these discussions.
So thank you so much for that, Prof. And hopefully we do see that adoption and people embracing the technologies available. You've sort of answered the next question, but I'll give Mrs. Pearl the opportunity nevertheless, right? And we're coming to the role and responsibilities of, you know, leadership in business or leaders in business, board members, companies. How can they work together? How can they integrate climate resilience metrics into their ESG reporting framework? And how can they also ensure that, you know, there's that alignment across the organization when it comes to championing climate resilience? Pearl?
Thank you so much, Joanna. Honestly, this is one of my, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, go ahead.
Fantastic. I was saying thank you so much for that, Joanna. It is one that is really dear to my heart, because I think the very first thing that needs to happen if you really want this integrated into a company is the mindset, the tone from the top, the genuine authenticity around wanting to actually do it. Because I know we've heard a lot of people talk today about greenwashing, and yes, that, you know, like I said, there are different challenges facing businesses here. But I think the very first thing that you need to have is a leadership, management at whatever organization genuinely believing that this is something that they want to do. And then genuinely, again, you don't have to do a wide variety of things, but I'm just saying that whatever it is you choose to do, you need to top. What it does is it ensures that there's the buy-in from the other individuals within the organization. And I heard some of the other speakers speak about, you know, talking to the different individuals. And what that means is, if you want to do this in a way that is methodical and logical, there's something called materiality assessment. And what that just means is, you're saying, as it concerns the environment, what are those factors that will affect this business's continuity if we don't immediately arrest it, if we don't start to do things to mitigate it, if we don't start to put in a plan? And so what you do is the management has decided we want to do this. You pull together your key stakeholders. You very quickly start to assess, if you're, for example, a company in the energy sector, there are just certain things that will matter significantly. Your emissions, you know, you need to tie it into what your business is doing and how that is impacting your immediate environment and beyond. And then once you've worked out, okay, these are the things that our stakeholders are saying are most important. These are the things that our employees, I keep saying, people forget employees in this mix. What are the employees saying is most important for our continuity as it concerns climate? For example, those in procurement might say, my goodness, your supply chain is way too long. Or your stakeholders, the communities are like, you're really polluting the environment. You need to do better or support us in this way. Your employees are saying, you know, so you get the data from all of them. And then immediately you come up with metrics and a plan. So this is where people sometimes forget. So they just say, oh, we're going to support the environment, or we're recycling. What is the actual goal that you have here? So one thing I would love people to take away from this is that it should never be a goal that resides in one department, like sustainability, for example, where I've headed sustainability units. It's very important that if the mindset at the top is in alignment, right? What you very quickly do is you get stakeholders within all of everybody has to tie into whatever that goal is. So if you say, for example, we need to improve our water efficiency by X, Y, puts a percentage to it, puts a date, timeline. We need to do it within this amount of time. So you're tying it into the organization's corporate strategy. You're tying it into people's performance objectives. And that's where you see very good markers around impact, because the whole business is buying into this. And that's why it needs to be tied into your area of operation. For example, I've seen energy companies decide, okay, we're in the production business. We're operating out of particular communities. We can see that we are, for example, flaring gas. There's associated gas. Rather than have this get associated, we're going to reduce emissions or reduce our flaring by 50% by 2030, for example, right? Then you're working with the community, and then they will redirect the gas that was being flared into, for example, channeling, producing energy for that particular community. the different units and organizations the different departments within your organization key into that. You guys can see what the long-term goal is. You have buy-in from your various stakeholders. You have a long stop date, and it's genuine. There's an authenticity to it. People can feel it, as opposed to things that feel a little bit gratuitous. You know, people can feel it when you're being gratuitous. You're not being sincere about it, and that's how organizations start to make changes that will ensure that the stakeholders see that they're serious about what they're saying, that they get buy-in from the different units because they see how this is going to be to their advantage. If I use that particular example, you know, there are lots of organizations operating in communities that are really struggling to support them because they don't feel the businesses have their best interest. So there's this concept of shared value. If you're doing something like this in a community, can you imagine the buy-in that you're going to get? You're giving them 24-hour power. And this has happened with one of the companies that I've worked with, Sahara, and they went into a community that they were operating out of, converted the flared gas it was channeled into gas power generators, and is supplying them 24 hours of power. You get absolute buy-in and shared value by the community. And so you have a goal, you know that you're reducing your emissions by a number that is tangible. The various businesses are keying into it, and you avoid the disingenuous interventions that people will very quickly describe as greenwashing. Yep, and of course you then key into the advantages that come with that.
Thank you very much for that. You've actually answered 2 questions.
Sorry, I hope you
one.
can still hear me.
Yes, I can. You've actually answered 2 questions in one, because you've also highlighted how businesses can partner with local communities, right, when it comes to co-creating sustainable climate resilient solutions. Thank you for that. And as well, as you have said, the tone is set from the top, right? It's when people see, that, the top is serious about it, top management, top leadership, they're serious about this issue, they will take it on. So thank you so much for that breakdown, Carl Izokwe.
Absolutely.
Coming to
and sorry, if I could add one more thing to that. So sorry, Joanna.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Joanna. I was going to add one more thing to working with the community. It's just that something that I see happen a lot is that you must, and I love the word co-creation that was used, you must co-create with the communities that you're operating out of. And what do I mean by that? You have an idea, right? I think that a lot of times, especially for whether it's private sector, multilaterals, foreign government, there's a level of presumption that also exists. So like, we know better, we know how to intervene without actually actively speaking and listening to the communities that you want to basically carry out these interventions in. So I've seen these work really well, where your core stakeholder has got to be those communities that you want to intervene in. We've carried out initiatives in, for example, Ijora Oloye. And sometimes you'll find that when you do that listening, what you thought you could see, the individuals who are right at the heart of it, can actually guide you to ensure that you have an even more effective and impactful intervention. If I give an example, we went into Ijora Oloye and basically had Recycle Exchange, a hub that was set up because we'd seen that there was a lot of flooding going on in the community. And it was like, how do we ensure, and we felt there was a nexus between that and health conditions that we found. Going in there, speaking to the primary healthcare centers, basically confirmed those assumptions around the nexus between the excessive flooding because their waterways were flooded and health conditions. Once that was confirmed, it was down to really work with the various stakeholders in those communities, from the Oba to the market women, to the youth, to the waste, to LASHMA, waste collection agencies, to ensure that you are creating a recycle exchange hub that was giving them not just, because you have to be dealing with their own primary issues. And I was saying that things like climate change will be dead on arrival if you go to a community like that and they haven't eaten in a particular day. And so it was saying, bring these recyclables, we will exchange them on the spot for not just cash, but also for health insurance. And it was working with, for example, a government agency to say, okay, let's reduce this health insurance by the lowest possible number. So individuals were not only earning a source of income, they were also of course, clearing up the environment, minimizing the health conditions that we found were most highest and had that nexus with excessive flooding. You also had effects that we hadn't anticipated, like increased numbers of schooling, because individuals and children didn't have to be out of school anymore because they could actually collect the recyclables over the weekend or after school. You had a reduction in the vagrancy. So to the point that we had the Obas in that community saying, I'm going to give you additional communities to work in, because now bring this to the hall and earn a living from it. But, you know, there's health, and this can only be achieved by actually speaking to the people, listening to them, and trying to incorporate that. I just wanted to add that to the answer.
All right, thank you very much, Pearl, for that addition. And then we're getting close to the end of the session, but I'd like to come to you, Mr. Suleiman Dikwa. Haven't had all these conversations around how businesses operate, considering the climate change and corporate social responsibilities and then long-term sustainability goals. What steps can organizations take to build a climate-aware culture that aligns with their long-term business strategies? And then if you can also add in a very short time, what responsibilities should board of directors have in overseeing climate resilience strategies, and how can they provide effective guidance to the management?
Thank you very much, Samuel. First of all, we have to put this in context of design, and then we're operating in quadrants which are not interlocked. But all the strategies that have been adopted by various companies and all that have discussed here, you see that they're in boxes. I still strongly believe that you can never treat the issue of sustainability in isolation, because it is interrelated. We all know the system interchanges into the order. Then we look at the frame. In Nigeria, we have 10 different national climate change policy, nationally determined contribution, nationally adaptation plan, the Green Bond Initiative, renewable energy, national. How do you bring this now to the company? How do you bring this to the conversation? It is about the time. That's why I took the period between 1950, where there was a catastrophe. When you come to the 80s, those of us who are familiar with the story, IBM. At that time, it was IBM and Kodak. What happened? The person that actually Kodak, but the company didn't pick it. They didn't understand it. And now, I think a few years ago, a multi-billion-dollar company has gone. Then you come to the story of IBM. IBM realized at that time, we're talking about data, that, oh, a lot of HP has come, what Apple is, Macintosh and stuff like that. The information, so they actually went to build this data, which today is actually the forebearer of the AI. So how are companies thinking? How are they adapting? Are they going to rise in dealing with sustainability? When I was in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, as a professor, was an architecture. Why am I raising that? Because in the first place, it is about, there's a Nobel Prize winner who works. She's late now, Elina Armstrong, which did the work, including Nigeria. And she argued, what organization? We're talking about people first. When you don't, most systems and processes fail because in the first place, you have not on bending. Because if you install, is that we all know garbage in, garbage out. So in the first instance, it's society is organized before you now come into the company, because let's not make the mistake of the industrial era whereby the company, that how does a company build a culture rather than how is society organized, because the company too is a transition. We have an opportunity. It is about natural capital. It is what we have first. If you now connect the dots, the issue of community has been raised, issue of corporate social responsibility, ESG. How do you tie them now? You bring, how do we organize when you organize yourself, how you are going to live, which has been, and then you look at city design. When you look at sustainability, the whole issue started from the bigger the city, the poverty relation to sustainability has to do with that. People move to the cities. This has been the trend for are being pulled to support these cities. So people in the rural area are now think come and overload the resources, and there's inequality of income between these overloads. So you find out some cannot sustain and will abandon the source of. So how do companies adapt? Companies have to think out of the box. There's a new way of doing business. There's a grand transition ongoing. And I will take the issue of Unilever, which was said by the first speaker. I know the story of Unilever, and it was under the other company in India. Years back, they said the strategic corporate objective is not mutually exclusive from corporate social responsibility promoted by Kava and Pota. So in Moga, they actually started with the milk issue. Then Nestle, the other company, took 400 million people out of poverty. The major question, the part of the question that I wasn't read, all these policies that to where the policies, how do the policies relate? How do they relate to value? How do they apply to the companies? And when it comes to the board, the first issue is ethics. If they do not believe, if they do not take stakeholders, you find a case of greenwashing. So has to agree, has to find a purpose. And behind that purpose, they have to create a specific adaptation. So it is more that you can never isolate from the whole big picture. That's why you now create new businesses, new ways of this. What Kodak happened to Kodak will not happen to 100 years have not adapted. They try to meet to completely think another way. They're happy. We have to put it in that there is a their aim now is to make profit. Yes, you will find people like that will be greedy. They want to make it now. They don't care about future generations. A company that will last 100 years. But an individual who drives a company, a board of directors, who actually has will take those actions beyond meeting their immediate needs, but the needs of future generations, 3, 4, 5, from the thinking of the board, from the thinking of society. It's easier. We're only a product. Easier now to build a culture because you already come from the Belgium. From the you want to bring in this time, you look at even what is your exposure. Do you need to dematerialize? What is your material flow analysis? What is your ecological? You have to ask those questions of yourself. Then instead of mitigation, which will be a short term, you have the society will create new opportunities out of these things. Then we'll find out that in those all 10 policies, there is an opportunity of about $12 billion. We're not even looking at it, but it is something we've subscribed. It is the biggest business opportunity in Nigeria. And lastly, we have to go beyond, sorry, I just have to say this, we have to go beyond in terms of reporting, that companies actually subscribe part of their corporate social responsibility into actually developing these value chains like Moga and Unilever have done in other countries, which we are not asking them to do here. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for that and for those recommendations. Hopefully, we see them being adopted and addressed, right? We have these conversations for sensitization and so that, you know, companies and businesses can be made more aware, make the necessary changes and adaptations. So a huge thank you for all the wealth of knowledge made available from all our speakers today. Our time is fast spent. I'm sure there's a lot more to be said, but there's plenty of time, some other time perhaps to continue the conversation. But a huge thank you to everyone that took the time out to be a part of today's webinar. I see some of you in the chat room from Anambra State, Akure, from University of York, and so on and so forth. A huge pleasure to have every single one of you in. And thank you to our panelists as well. This webinar, right, was organized by Nairametrics. It's something we do every month, zero in on a particular industry. Today, we looked at climate change, which affects various industries. I'm going to hand over to Wade Aime, who's going to give the closing remark as we tie this together.
Thank you, Joanna. First of all, let me thank all our panelists, Mr. Suleiman Dikwa, Mrs. Peluzokwe, Professor Sunday Adebisi, Mr. Ibrahim Salau. Having been in this space in the last decade, I fully understand what everybody's talking about. And 5 key things that came to me as you were talking was leadership. If the tone at the top is not right, you must walk the talk, not just speak the talk. Collaborations and partnerships are really essential to ensuring that not only do we have a well-designed climate action system, but also to encompass all the SDGs. Mr. Suleiman Dikwa mentioned reporting, and that must be integrated across the value chain. So it's not just about the big business who is reporting how much they're putting into sustainability or climate actions, but everybody along its supply chain, along its value chain was also coming to it. Innovative technology is something that we hear. Renewables, Professor Sunday Adebisi spoke about waste and turning it into opportunities for turning it into alternative energy, recycling so that we can use them again. And lastly, but not the least, the use of data. We need to build data in this country because without data, we can't get the dynamics of the things that we need to move forward. And that's what we do at Nairametrics. We work with data, we continually work with data. We're open to working with those who would provide us the data so that we can continually do our analysis and so on. Thank you very much once again. Remember that you can join us on X Spaces every Tuesday and Thursday where we speak about different issues. You can join us on Radio 97.3 Classic FM on Mondays and follow my partner. Listen to my partner as he talks about capital markets and the economy as a whole on Follow the Money. You can join me and my colleagues on Wednesday, Everyday Money Matters, where we talk about financial literacy for businesses, for individuals, and how all that correlates using data. Thank you very much once again, and have a great Saturday. And thank you for sparing us this 2 hours of your Saturday. Have a great day, everyone.